Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the distinguished gentleman from New York for yielding me the customary 30 minutes, and I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The rule before us today provides for consideration of 3 pieces of legislation, including H.R. 350, which my colleagues claim will prevent incidents of domestic terrorism. But let's make no mistake, Republicans are committed to fighting hatred and violence in all forms. Unfortunately, H.R. 350 does absolutely nothing to actually make our community safer. Rather, this legislation expands the federal bureaucracy. It ignores new and evolving domestic terrorist threats, and it makes it more difficult for law enforcement to recruit and retain qualified candidates. Alarmingly, it empowers Biden's DOJ to continue labeling American parents and other political opponents as threats to stifle their First Amendment rights. The rule before us today also provides for consideration of H.R. 7688, the Democrats' attempt to distract and shift blame for President Biden's self-inflicted energy crisis. Since its first day in office, President Biden has waged an unrelenting war on American energy producers. From canceling the Keystone XL pipeline to suspending oil and gas leasing on federal lands, President Biden's radical Green New Deal policies have discouraged, they have denied development of the American energy resources and the American energy sector. Yet at the same time that Joe Biden has done all this, he absolutely refuses to take any accountability for the soaring gas prices and the economic pain he continues to inflict on hardworking American families. First, the president tried to blame Putin. Despite the fact that gas prices were rising more than 50%, had risen more than 50% during his first year in office. In quick history lesson, that's 1 year before Russia ever invaded Ukraine. In fact, gas prices have increased every single month of this presidency. And now the president's blaming hardworking oil and gas producers in places like Pennsylvania and other places across the country, accusing them of price gouging, even though multiple FTC investigations have repeatedly concluded supply and demand is the ultimate driver of these rising prices. And by the way, an artificial decrease in supply thanks to these radical policies. H.R. 7688 will impose a socialist price-fixing scheme on oil and gas, leading to even less production, which will hit small businesses and American families the hardest. Now, I wasn't alive in the 1970s, but I know there are a lot of members in this chamber who were, and I'm sure they can remember waiting in line to fuel up their cars. If H.R. 7688 is signed into law, that travesty will once again be a reality. Finally, the rule before us makes an order H.R. 7790, the Infant Formula Supplemental Appropriations Act. Under President Biden's leadership, our nation is facing an infant formula supply crisis with reports that more than 40% of formula is out of stock. So instead of working with Republicans to redirect excess stocks of formula at federal agencies and force the FDA to develop a plan to address this shortage, House Democrats simply want to throw money at the problem with absolutely no plan, no guardrails to ensure that funding is spent to actually put baby formula back on grocery store shelves. Let me be clear, we're giving $28 million to the very same unelected career bureaucrats who failed to address this crisis when it came to their attention a year ago. It's absolutely madness. H.R. 7790 will do nothing, absolutely nothing, to alleviate Biden's baby formula crisis. And it is American babies and American families who will be forced to suffer the consequences. Mr. Speaker, I'd be remiss if I failed to mention that today's rule also does not make an order a single Republican amendment. But I guess I shouldn't be surprised. Republicans have attempted to work with our Democratic colleagues to make our community safer, to address inflation and lower gas prices, and to help parents feed their babies. But it's absolutely clear from today's rule and from their actions over the last 3 years that House Democrats would rather continue their partisan political theater than put forth real solutions to help real Americans. I urge my colleagues to oppose this rule, and I reserve the balance of my time.